I think Bitcoin, as we know, the monetary policy is out there. This other message that it's not just about the Bitcoin, why we do all of this. It's about freedom, human flourishing. What comes after? Bitcoin is a tool to help you really, wake up each day and pursue the why that matters most to you. And so when I talk to a lot of my friends, and, clearly they see I'm very interested in Bitcoin and I spend a lot of time thinking about it. But I try to emphasize it's just a tool, in your toolkit. You don't need to change, and you shouldn't change whatever you're interested in to be interested in Bitcoin. It just lets you show up into this world as you would like to. It lets you choose.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Ella Hough to the podcast. Ella is a Gen Z senior at Cornell, founder at Cornell Bitcoin Club, co-founder at the Bitcoin Students Network, author and Bitcoin speaker. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Ella.
Thank you so much for having me, Paula.
Well, I've been following your journey and a lot more recently. It really is incredible how much you have on your plate. Tell us a little bit about Bitcoin-focused study at Cornell and what led to that.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. So yes, we're doing two studies at Cornell, but the first one that I started about 15 months ago is through a kind of independent major program at Cornell called the Robert S. Harrison College Scholar Program. And in that, they essentially created it. So if you're a student and you have a question that you think is really important to answer or pursue, but you can't find it in any established major program, then they created the infrastructure so that you can pursue it. You can have access to classes you want to take. You can be able to form a committee of professors who will be there to kind of guide you, give you advice. And so when I transferred to Cornell for my second year of university, I started at NYU Shanghai. I, was looking at what am I going to study? Do I keep my computer science and Chinese that I had been? But, what else could I do? And as well, I can share this later, but I had just gotten back from the Oslo Freedom Forum and really wanted to study Bitcoin. And so that became the process that took 15 months. And now here we are today through this program. I have put together a Bitcoin focused study within that degree program. And so mine incorporates a lot of linguistics, game theory, cognitive science. I have a cognitive science major as well, and then information science, moral psychology, and business minors. And so I was able to take a lot of kind of the coursework and pieces that I learned in that interested me and kind of apply it all over to Bitcoin. And I defended my thesis on Monday and passed. So it's reaching the conclusion stages of that. And then we're also doing, through the Brooks Tech Policy Institute, a study on Bitcoin adoption.
Wonderful. What led you to Bitcoin, and were you already into it before you started your studies at Cornell?
Yes, to a certain extent. I published my only Bitcoin magazine article the day I moved into Cornell. So I think they kind of really took off together in the more active sense. But I first, heard the word Bitcoin when I was a senior in high school. This was 2021. And I was in this certificate program called the Technology, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship program. And to complete it, you specialized in one of those different strands. And so I chose the innovation one to really focus on. And you do a project at the end of your time at the school, and you take classes in those areas. And so one class that was offered was called Blockchain Technologies. I distinct it between I learned about Bitcoin and I kind of discovered it. And so I would say that's when I learned of it. It was really only presented, though, through distributed ledger technology. How does Dunkin' Donuts use blockchain to track their coffee beans? A lot of supply chain. And I, really gravitate towards the human element of things, side of things. And at the time, I had just gotten back from what was supposed to be a year abroad studying in Beijing and really, dove deep into the language and the characters. Might seem like a jump, but how we can code ethics into a language, specifically AI. So that was where my head was at, what I wanted to study in college. And then I learned it spring 2021 is when I took that class. And then a year passed. And after my first year at NYU Shanghai, I went to the Oslo Freedom a forum put on by the Human Rights Foundation. And I went with my mom. And that was where all, I think, the pieces really started to come together. And I saw kind of for the first time the human side of, Bitcoin and really what it is. I think I discovered it much more then. And then I transferred to Cornell and just felt so much called to put all my time and energy into learning about Bitcoin. Because as you know, from all the many people you've interviewed and all the work you've done, it's so interdisciplinary. There's so many different avenues. And so, yeah, when I got here, it really took off from there.
I love that you're into the human side, and we'll get into that. I spoke to your mom, as you know, and your mom is into the energy and mining sector of Bitcoin. So she didn't try to orange pill you before that time?
So we really found it about the same time, different ways. She was definitely sooner than me by a couple months or maybe a year. She read about it. I think she'll have to tell the story, but I think she read like a magazine article, and she's very curious, always, wanting to learn. Oh, what's this? What's that? And I think just as like a side project, she was just kind of mapping a lot of different technologies that were evolving and coming around. And she just found Bitcoin through that sense and started learning more about it. I was then taking this class. We both took the Gary Gensler MIT kind of blockchain and money class online, and would talk about it, read like send podcasts, books, and then it was really nice to have another person to talk through, especially. I think for me, I probably got more benefit out of it because I wasn't as familiar with what is money, what the importance of property rights. I had never really, worked full time. I had a job. I was thinking about saving and how do I take care of myself. But I think she really helped me put some of those dots together as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have people that we can talk about it with, because although you did start several groups at Cornell, the Bitcoin Club and the Bitcoin Students Network, how many of your students and peers are involved in these groups?
Sure. So the Cornell Bitcoin Club and the Bitcoin Students Network, they both started roughly the same time. But the Cornell Club, obviously, it's just here. And the Students Network, we have contacts with students across about 73 countries. So it's much more global. And it began really because when I got to Cornell, I wanted to start a Bitcoin club. I was like, okay, I want to study Bitcoin. I also want to share this with other people because I think it's something others should know. And there's a quote that I really like by C.C. Chapman. It essentially goes, part of it is share all you know with all who ask. And now, no one asked me to start this club, so I went a little off script on the quote. But you just want to share something once you see it with others. And so I went, and campus activities said, it's really better if you join a similar club rather than start your own. And also, you need to have 10 members initially, and I didn't know anyone. And so I was like, okay, I don't know anyone. I'll join the other club. And then it got to a point where I felt like, no more than 10 people now. I want to start this club. And so I did. It's a lot of work to start a club. There's a lot of like upfront kind of infrastructure you need to build. And also, you might think you're the only person that is interested about Bitcoin on your campus, as I did. And so the Students Network kind of stemmed from that, is how can we kind of give you all of like the upfront logistic type guides to start a club, and then educational resources, eventually hopefully some financial resources, and also community. Realize that no, you're not the only person that is interested in Bitcoin, maybe on your campus, but I have found that if you create the place, people will come. Now the Cornell Club's up to about 130 members, people that are interested and engaged. And so, in the meantime of that, though, if you're part of the network, you can join other clubs meetings. People in Taiwan and Malawi would tune into, the Bitcoin club meetings here in Ithaca. And so that's a big part of the Students Network as well. And then jobs. I think, when you start a club, people really come for the skills development, alumni, jobs, internships, and the community as well. So that's kind of the missions behind both of those groups.
Well, that really is inspiring, and it just shows that anybody can start a club if they have the purpose and passion behind it.
I should also add a caveat. It can take many different forms of what a club looks like. Some people that I talk to, they really want to, but it's like I just have a lot on my plate. And maybe you don't need to. Success is not, we have a full on workshop, lecture speaker every week or every other week. Success is just that you gather and maybe have a conversation that you otherwise wouldn't have. And so if that's, hey, let's all eat at the dining hall together tonight. Like, let's just have dinner together and maybe we talk about Bitcoin. Maybe we don't, but that's still a win. That, if it comes up a little bit, and so, if anyone's listening that is interested in starting a club, I just put that out there of, success can take many forms and it's really just the act of gathering. I think that's most important.
That's a great point. You have written some wonderful articles, and I really like the one on Bitcoin's effect on transformation of self. Tell us a little bit about this and why you believe Bitcoin is such a transformational force.
Sure. Actually, this started before I had the Bitcoin Club. I was, on campus sophomore year. And inevitably, when I would see a friend, I would talk about Bitcoin. Not always, but it would just come up. Things I'd learned that I wanted to share. And I realized, it would be great and also a challenge to myself if I kind of typed up these conversations that I found myself just having over and over again because, my friends would also be curious and ask me questions. And it's like, okay, what if I miss something or say something poorly or we have to go to class? Wouldn't it be nice if I could have a resource to share and send them to? And so I titled this blog series Sats Chats. Like, we just sat down and chatted. There's probably a lot of grammar errors in them because it was more of, I like to do hard things. And so I was like, okay, you're going to write these and just get it out. Doesn't need to be perfect. And it's also fun to go back now and see what I've learned and how I would say things differently now. Mm, But I think truly the essence of that one was probably along the lines of actually Bitcoin mining in a sense. Many people think that Bitcoin mining is about kind of mining Bitcoin. That was me, or at least I'll just speak, that was myself. I thought Bitcoin mining was all about mining Bitcoin. I really had not kind of connected or dove into the nuance that no, Bitcoin is the reward for doing, exerting energy, doing the work, and over time it goes away. In 2140, you will not have the Bitcoin reward in that. And so, abstracting a lot, I think Bitcoin, as we know, the monetary policy is out there. This other message that it's not just about the Bitcoin, why we do all of this. It's about freedom, human flourishing. What comes after? Bitcoin is a tool to help you really, wake up each day and pursue the why that matters most to you. And so when I talk to a lot of my friends, and clearly they see I'm very interested in Bitcoin and I spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I try to emphasize it's just a tool, in your toolkit. You don't need to change and you shouldn't change whatever you're interested in to be interested in Bitcoin. It just lets you show up into this world as you would like to. It lets you choose. Um, and so I think that's one element of this kind of transformation of self. It's more just like fulfillment of self and your purpose. Um, and I also feel there is a sense of being able to kind of act within the values that you really care about and are prioritized to you. And so there's also this ability to sort of just kind of, for me at least, I've felt I don't think I have changed what I care about or value pre and post finding Bitcoin, but I know for myself, I feel a lot of gratitude that I can work on something that I think aligns with how I want to act and kind of be a good human in the world. So there's that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Why do you think more students and people your age don't get Bitcoin as quickly as you? And the reason I say that, I mean, it's obvious in a way. In my 20s, I wasn't thinking too much about saving for the future and what money was, but you have got it so early. And why do you think more people don't? Besides that,
It's a variety of factors. I think for starters, I feel like everyone comes to Bitcoin for a different reason. Um, Specifically talking in the US, in the West at least, where we have a much more stable financial system where we don't, wake up. It's not like Libya last or maybe a month ago or so and a Sunday and your currency devalues by 13% overnight. That's not the reality that at least the people I surround myself on a day-to-day basis grow up with. I do have a lot of friends though from outside the US whose families are from, Russia, Iran, and for them they see it much, much faster. But on the whole, I think sometimes you don't know the right questions to ask. I was really fortunate that I had this class that introduced the topic to me. I had parents who really cared and wanted to have these conversations with me. Growing up, I never sat at a kid's table. I was always at the adults' table. And, the weekends, my mom would kind of curate stacks of books for all of us we had a round table. And on the weekends, we all made breakfast together and then we sat at the table. And then it wasn't, okay, check the box. We had our meal. Everyone go do your thing. It was, no, let's just talk to each other. And so they've really incorporated me into life conversations that I think sometimes people will shield their children from, as well as, money is really not taught in school. Daniel Prince has really written really interesting articles on kind of the roots of the US education system, back to that of the Prussian education system, and how it was really designed to suppress thought and not question. And so, you have those forces going in as well. And so I just think it's a variety, and people just need that lens to latch onto. Um, and I've certainly got it faster than others, but it was still a process. And I think, you kind of got to do the proof of work to connect the dots when you have less access to those personal experiences. And there's so much information, so much misinformation coming for our attention. And so that's why I really believe in the community kind of education efforts and kind of aligned with Bitcoin's ethos and adoption thus far.
so if you met somebody who was interested, where do you start the conversation?
I'll give you an example. So I recently gave a TEDx talk at Cornell, and afterwards, um, a student here came up to me, and we'd never met. And he was like, "Wow, thank you for the talk." And he started asking questions, and we chatted, and we had to leave the theater so that they could turn it over for the next event. But I was like, please let's set up some time to chat more. And so we did. And in the, 5 minutes we were chatting afterwards, he was expressing to me how he was writing a thesis on math and how math impacts humans. And so we had coffee yesterday, but before I sent him a link to, I think it was an Unchained blog explaining Bitcoin's main math equation. And so to directly answer your question, normally I just try to see what they're interested in. What are they already focused on? What really kind of lights their brain on fire? And start the conversation there. And then when we had coffee yesterday, he was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so interesting." Like then he had all these other questions. And we, went down different rabbit holes. But actually the part that kind of surprised me most and I found most touching and something I hadn't ever really heard before was he said, I really had very different opinions than you. I didn't think I was going to agree with anything you were going to say about Bitcoin. But when I see someone so passionate about a topic, I really want to understand their perspective and point of view on it. And so, now I'm starting to see it. And so I think if you can really put Bitcoin into the language that they speak, that's the best way to start.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I have a niece who studies in Cape Town, and I I try. She does own a little bit of Bitcoin through me, but she's just not interested. Yeah, I think it's just because there's other focus for many younger kids and in college. I like what you say about meeting people where they are and finding something, a part of Bitcoin that interests them. That's a really good place to start.
Exactly. And kind of another layer on, I think, why I was so motivated or felt needed to figure it out is kind of the agency self, responsibility side of things. When I was, sitting around the table, one of those times when I was really little, my parents, I made a comment that I wanted to be kind of a history major. And they were like, let's talk about this. And it really laid out for me just how expensive it is to breathe and go outside. And they were like, look, when you turn 22, you're on your own. We're getting you through college, but then you got to figure it out. And so, I don't think many people tell their kids that, like, and really show the confidence that they have in them. And so, whether you want to or not, you have to figure out how to take care of yourself and support yourself. And so if you kind of put some personal stake into it and maybe a little bit of fear, I know I felt it like, okay, how am I going to take care of myself? That can be motivating as well. But, just like me when I was in that class and I really thought, okay, cool, blockchain, but not for me. I'm going to do my AI thing. You have to listen to that person and where their heart is.
I think you're absolutely right. And that was definitely a gift being told at 22 you're going to have to take care of yourself. And it is a gift because self-responsibility, we know,
Mhm.
self-sovereignty.
Yeah.
Did Bitcoin also help you get low time preference?
No, I think I've had that. I was like the homework helper when I was growing up. Well, I didn't have a phone, a cell phone. Oh, this is actually another piece I meant to say earlier. I think a lot of Bitcoin knowledge happens on social media. And I did not have social media outside of like LinkedIn until Bitcoin. And then my mom said, Ella, you have got to make a Twitter. This is where all of the news is. It's like, okay, I'll make it. It was anonymous. And so many people, like that's where a lot of the good information is. But none of my friends have Twitter or are on it or following the people. So there's that reality as well. But to go back, I got a phone way later than anyone else in my grade. And so people would email me homework questions and I really wanted to be able to answer. And so, for instance, I had a glass shower door. So I would tape all of my study notes there so that I could then be available for help. And I mean, growing up couldn't watch TV in the summer. So I just read. Yeah, so I think I've had the low time preference.
Oh, that's wonderful. You spoke at the Bitcoin Africa conference in Kenya. Tell us about that. Was that your first time in Africa and what you spoke about?
Thank you. So I, really appreciate everything the Africa Bitcoin Conference does and for having me. So first, thank you to them and Farida Nabrema, who organizes it. It was not my first time. It was my fourth time in Africa. I had been to Tanzania twice, and then I went to the second Africa Bitcoin Conference in Ghana the year prior. And actually, I'm going back in a couple weeks to work with Gridless for a couple months in Kenya. And so it was my fourth time, and I did a couple of different panels and workshops. So we did one kind of workshop packed with students about kind of starting a Bitcoin club. Why does Bitcoin matter for Gen Z? And then a couple of other panels, and then the big one which actually I was not supposed to give. Unfortunately, the professor, Sarah Krebs, that I get the immense privilege of working with here at Cornell, her flight travels got all discombobulated, so she could not make it to give the update on our study that we are doing here through the Brooks Tech Policy Institute, which she started. And so we gave an update of what is this study and where are we at right now.
So, since I'm from Zimbabwe, I have a little bit of knowledge about what goes on the ground in Zimbabwe. There is no on-ramp to the Bitcoin network. So, it's peer-to-peer and it's often more expensive because it's on the base layer. I have
Mhm.
spoken to people in Kenya who have some incredible technology there. And then I know it's
Yes.
different in Nigeria too. So, what have you learned from being over there? And
Yes.
how do you think
Yeah.
adoption grows, and is it technology related?
Much to unpack here. Also, want to give a shout out to Anita Posh. She was one of kind of the first people I met at Bitcoin Prague, like the first conference I ever went to. Actually met her and Farida at the same time. And I know she does great work in Zimbabwe and other spots. So Zimbabwe is not one of the countries in the study. Maybe I'll just preface the study a little bit and then dive in. So the study is one of really the largest of its kind. It is 25,000 surveys with and kind of an outside contracted survey company that does this across the 25 countries, and then 250 interviews as well across the countries, about 10 per country. And Professor Krebs and a few other professors, they took 178 countries and essentially scored them across about 18 different criteria to come up with the 25. So it was not just, let's look at a map and pick some countries. They had a real methodology to how they narrowed in on it. And then inside of the surveys, they are actually, I think they're about 21 pages, the surveys, asking a variety of questions. Of course, demographic information, as well as just basic financial knowledge information questions. And then to your question, do you use Bitcoin? Why? What's holding you back? Perceptions, all of that. And so we're just getting the data back. I'll save any spoilers because Professor Krebs is giving a presentation in a few weeks at the Oslo Freedom Forum on some updates that we have learned thus far. But on the whole, we hope that this study will be able to help policymakers, how with regulation and how people are using, interacting with it. Also, businesses and educators in the Bitcoin space, where are the gaps in knowledge? What, to your question, what products, what technology does not exist that would be really helpful? And then as well, what drives Bitcoin adoption, what holds it back, and also share the results with the public. All of the information will be open sourced. And it's really kind of the first of its kind on this scale and depth. A few years ago, maybe 2020, group of professors in Europe, I believe, did a survey off of local Bitcoins. And so they sent out surveys to about 1.4 million their users and then got like 66,000 responses back. This study is unique in that we do have the interview component, so we can try to add some nuance to the data that's coming in and try to not let anything fall through the cracks and try to avoid bias or misrepresentation. And it's very interesting, the different kind of cultural implications that come up. So, for instance, in Indonesia and Kenya, which is, they're both countries in the study, Kenya has had M-Pesa since about 2014-ish. Also, there's really great products now like Tando, which is so incredible to follow their success. But the whole act of kind of sending money digitally in Indonesia, this came up as well, kind of e-money, digital money, it's less of a barrier to sort of get over. You also have countries, though, like Japan, where action really stems from maybe a stamp of approval from the government or certain institutions. And until that comes, kind of mass adoption there is held back a little bit. You also have like South Korea as a country, and real estate is really prioritized there. Also, they've had kind of the Do Kwon, Terra Luna scams that backfired. And so it's not a one size fits all adoption pattern. There's a lot of just culture that has to be acknowledged and has influence over these that are really outside necessarily the realm of what, a business or an educator can necessarily change or, just build a technology and it's going to fix that. It's really like, how is the message presented? And so all of this has been really interesting to start gathering and synthesizing to share for the benefit of the adoption and community.
And you mentioned regulation, and I just wanted to bring it up because, as you know, many of the leaders at the top benefit from the fiat system. Do you see that as being a little bit of a challenge towards Bitcoin?
Yeah, so it's funny, or maybe not funny is the right word, but when the regulation topic comes up, um, there, it all ties back to the US largely. It's, only whatever the US does, our government will follow in that sense. And I wish I'm blanking right now, but there was an interesting story that came out of, I think it was Turkey. Um, Anyways, the US has a strong influence as well. Certainly, people high up benefit from the current system. But I think that's why, what BPI is doing, what like the Policy Institute in the UK is doing, all of the people that are really talking to their local policymakers, it's all really important and has impacts way further than what they might know. So, yesterday, like New Hampshire being the first state to kind of create their Bitcoin strategic reserve, I know it seems crazy, but to some extent, that's going to have impacts on what happens in these countries around the world. And I think that's really optimistic as well.
I agree. That was wonderful news. And as we know, you can't stop Bitcoin.
No, no.
You might make it more difficult for people in your own country, but you Bitcoin is it has continued for the last 16 years, no hacks, which is wonderful and available to all. And that brings me back to the humanitarian side. Why is that so important to you?
So, my mom we have a shared notes on our phone, and she was really scared that she would die before I kind of grew up, like when I was little. And so she started this note. Now it's digital, it's like got a phone, but basically just nuggets of wisdom, as she calls it. And it's called the Good Life Guide. And rule number one is be a good human. And I just feel in my own life, I'm not on this earth for myself. I think, for me, most fundamentally, why we do everything that we do is how can I be of service? How can I do good? And I just feel like Bitcoin is the greatest fulfillment of that, or kind of value aligned purpose that I can do. If I have so much time and energy on this earth, how can I use it to the greatest extent that I know of? And so for me, nothing embodies it like Bitcoin does.
So, did Bitcoin become part of your mission and purpose? And what is your mission and purpose?
My, well, so I heard this thing from someone a couple years ago where it was basically like, before you go to sleep each night, think about your why for the next morning. Why are you waking up? What are you excited about? And for a long, long time, mine has been I just want to help people pursue what brings them joy. And so for me, that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Like I was saying earlier, it's not about Bitcoin, it's what comes after. And I have this maybe loose analogy to oxygen, because oxygen is very plentiful and Bitcoin is scarce. But in our day to day, like right now, I have not thought about the air that I'm breathing, the act of breathing once until I brought this up. It just works. It's transparent, it's permissionless, it's open, it's not necessarily immutable because someone could pollute the air, but you breathe it in and it lets us have this conversation and think about new ideas and, pursue what we would like to. I hope for many, young people, really everyone anywhere, but realistically, I think it's the younger generations and those to come that eventually Bitcoin, it's like your economic oxygen. You don't really think about it that much. It works in the background. It works when you're sleeping. It works when you're not thinking about it. And it lets you show up and live your life in a way that you can help others find joy or whatever your thing is. And so that's sort of how I look at it. If Bitcoin didn't exist in this world, I would probably doing like the AI ethics thing or who knows what else, but I would still be rooted in I'm not here to live my life for myself.
That's wonderful. You're an old soul, Ella.
I am. Everyone when I was little would my other parents would tell my parents, Ella's like a 30-year-old trapped inside of a 12-year-old's body, and that's kind of true, maybe.
You wrote that Bitcoin was coded for empathy. How did you come to that conclusion?
Yes. So often I find myself not being able to fall asleep because my brain is just going on Bitcoin things or things I've learned throughout the day. And maybe I'm kind of coming down and processing. Very inopportune time to be having my brain all like scattered and fired up thinking about something. But I wrote, this was one of these nights, and I literally had to get out of bed and go write this article because I was thinking about um, so I mentioned language earlier, and I'll tell a little bit of the backstory to help set this up. So when I was my junior year of high school, I chose to do a study abroad program in Beijing. I did not know a word of Chinese at all. Most people thought this was a bad idea and that I shouldn't go. But I thought, you know what? It's like an 8 hour sleep and a couple movies away. It'll be fine. If it doesn't work out, I'll come back, but I'm not going to be scared of something that I can't identify. And so I went and I lived with a host family who are incredible. I still talk to them to the day. And I had incredible teachers and 26 classmates who I didn't know till we all got to the airport. And we had Chinese class every day. My host family really only spoke Chinese. One spoke very decent English. And early on in one of our lectures, my Chinese teacher wrote on the whiteboard the word for filial piety, which is one of the tenets of Confucianism and describes one of kind of the five main relationships in your life, and that's between parent and child. And so, what this tenet says is that when you are little, your parents will care for you, they'll take care of you. And when you grow up and when you're older, you will take care of them. And so at my host family, both sets of grandparents lived with us in the apartment. Sometimes they didn't sleep there, but one set of grandparents cooked every breakfast, the other set cooked every dinner. They would pick up my two host sisters from school. One of them would walk me to school every day until I knew my way. Even though he didn't speak any Chinese, I didn't, or in English, I didn't speak any Chinese. And he would be there right outside the gate waiting to pick me up. And we would walk home together. And so I saw it in real life. And the character literally visually shows this. So on the bottom is the character for child, and on top is the character for old. And so it literally is like set together so that you see the young supporting the elderly. And I thought, wow, isn't that so cool that a language, kind of a cultural, natural, social language, can code ethics or a way of action into how they speak and write. And I was just about to begin, in coming months, what turned into a 2 year job at IBM. And obviously, they're very AI focused. And I was taking this online AI class. And I thought, there's these theories of super intelligence and basically machines becoming smarter than all of humanity. There's no seatbelt. They don't know, necessarily what's right, what's wrong. And across cultures, it looks differently. There's a really, I guess, kind of famous now study about how in France versus China, if you have a car that essentially has to hit a person, who do you save? And in China, they are going to save the elderly, but in France, they're going to save the mother or the baby, just different cultural values. And so I think ultimately, and I've taken classes since, I don't really think you can code ethics into AI or any technology in that sense, especially because it just looks different all over the place. But Bitcoin, I think, can and kind of can take us further than just language can. And so I also learned this theory, the language game, and that so right now you've been nodding, signaling to me that you are following along. And when you speak, I do the same, back channel. And we have to do this, play this game, because there exists a bottleneck in language. And it's a struggle to get meaning through that bottleneck so we can have a conversation. But when we nod or say, that helps us succeed. And so I think Bitcoin is like this language that every person can speak anywhere in a permissionless nature, in a way that aligns with their values. Really, kind of language plus Bitcoin can take us further, and how the values of Bitcoin are known. Yeah, I think I write in the article that the future is unknown, as it should be. you know, all we can do is, show up each day, wake up each day, and try to walk in line with the values that we believe in. I think Bitcoin helps us do that. So that's why I think it's kind of coded for ethics or uh, empathy, morals, because it's kind of coded for the ethics, empathy, morals of every node. I think every person, every node in Bitcoin's a leader, and you get to use it to how you want to show up in the world. And I really love the book Resistance Money by Andrew Bailey, Bradley Rettler, and Craig Wormacke. And the first line in the book is Bitcoin is for criminals. But they go on to make the point that not all people are bad, not all laws are good. And so, yeah, I just think it's like this dynamic language that allows us to navigate life in the best sense that we can.
Yeah, that's a really deep rabbit hole. Something to,
Yes, yeah. So I recommend the art. I think the article, I say it a little bit more concisely, perhaps better. And I conclude that article with a little tie into AI, guided by Drew Bansal, who co-founded Unchained. He has a really interesting theory. Now it's more popular about kind of the interaction between AIs, plural, agents, and Bitcoin, and how humans own the Bitcoin. And so, AI requires a lot of money, and, what money are they going to use? Makes more sense probably if they use a digital money rather than fiat. And so if humans control Bitcoin and have the Bitcoin, then they can kind of, reward or not pay the AI based on how it acts and what values it does or does not do.
that's really interesting. And how's your Chinese, by the way?
Buhao. It's it's declining since I have not taken it in 3 years. It was fairly good. Within my first 100 days in China, I gave a 5-minute memorized speech in Chinese, but then you don't use it and it declines. But one of my post graduation is I would really like to pick up my classes again.
Yeah, well, at least you have the baseline, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you will. So,
Yes.
why is Bitcoin for Gen Zs?
I mean, for starters, just practically, they're in the same generation. But even like Gen Alpha, younger ones, it's sound money. I think these generations are already digitally native in the sense that most of us have all of our messages and emails or, text, all our photos. We don't have a lot of printed photos. I mean, most simplistically, it just makes sense. It makes sense for Gen Z anywhere around the world. You can't open a bank account till a certain age. Many places around the world, you just cannot necessarily have access to the financial system like you used to be able to. I wrote a report earlier, or last summer actually, it's almost been a year, basically making like the investment case for it was why wealth managers should be knowledgeable about Bitcoin for future generations. And right now, the kind of climate is that like 70% of Gen Z is not hopeful about the future, scared about setting up long-term goals, doesn't really think it's going to be super possible to retire, or doesn't really know where to begin. And like their greatest fear above anything else is related to finances and the economy. And so they don't feel like the American dream works anymore. They don't feel 6% think the financial system, I think, currently works the way it is for them. And so I think they're just looking around. It's like, I don't have enough to make a down payment on a house. I don't know what stocks and bonds I should do. Many don't even have access to that. But Bitcoin, I mean, if you in the US, you have, I mean, I prefer to go to it's like River, Cash App, something like that, Strike, but many of them have Venmo. Like, look, you could literally start stacking sats there. You don't, need all of these other loopholes out there. So one sentence, it literally just makes sense.
So, what you're saying is they see the problem, they just haven't seen the solution.
They see, I think, side effects of the problem, but I don't think they entirely see and this took me time. Do I want more dollars or do I want more sats? Which mindset do I denominate in? And so I think up until you sort of need to make the underlying, like James Lavish talks about the debt spiral, there's no way out of this. And Jeff Booth, what system am I reinforcing and putting my time and energy into building? And so everyone knows that inflation is a thing, and that it's a problem. But for instance, most people probably don't know that over like the past 25 years, the money supply in the US has expanded by 363%. It's not enough to just kind of plan for your future in a dollar denominated or euro denominated or Naira denominated future. You really need to think about how can I denominate my future in a sound system. And I think that's where truly the Bitcoin piece comes in.
Yeah, it really is a mindset shift because in order to get there, you have
Hmm.
to understand Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
that takes a little bit of study.
Yeah, and I really like Jeff Booth's framework. I mean, his was, I think, the first Bitcoin book I read, The Price of Tomorrow. And prior to that, I had read like The Psychology of Money, and I had also just read The Founders, which basically tells the story of how PayPal was founded and this whole idea of like zapping money across phones. And so this was what I was sort of primed with. I like how he says, we all have a different view of reality, and I can't and I don't want to force my view of reality on someone else. And so I really like how he kind of cautions against the orange pill narrative. Um, I agree with that. When I talk to my friends, my message is not go buy Bitcoin. My message is, you're smart, you can figure this out. Trust in yourself. I'm here as a resource. Here's, some pieces of what I'm picking up from you and kind of guide or share, but not pressure, because I think to be more sustainable with it, they have to understand kind of what they're owning and buying. And if I just say, buy Bitcoin, the second the price drops, they're going to sell it. And so, I also don't really think like buying Bit like buy like the terminology is really much deeper and more than that. And actually to quote someone I was just in Japan for the Tokyo Bitcoin base opening, and one of the panelists said, why these community spaces are so important is we're not selling you anything. We are teaching you about Bitcoin and these other topics so that you can have the peace that I know. And that is what I would hope for my generation. Like, life is hard. There's a lot that's going to cause us stress. But if we can just work on this one thing that is totally in reach, kind of have peace or greater peace in this area, then that's what I would want to share.
That's a beautiful message. And I just released my interview with Jeff Booth this week. And
Wow. Okay. Amazing.
he really goes into that because I was asking a little bit from, spending time in the other in the other system, having a little bit of a hedge in that system. But he is so gentle with saying, this is where I spend my time because it's the world that I want to see. And
Mhm.
he goes
Exactly.
quite into depths of how that even somebody, even buying MicroStrategy and the ETFs eventually are going to have to choose which system to be in. So,
Exactly. Yeah. So
yeah.
I take a, so many people have helped me on my journey. I owe so much gratitude. People like Jeff Booth and others. And so, I feel a lot of gratitude for all the people that have helped me kind of connect the dots as I have for today.
Do you think there's a spiritual side to Bitcoin?
Yes. Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think in actually one of the sentences in the article earlier, I sort of laddered it up and, said in this way, I think Bitcoin is divine. So I think so. I also, grew up Christian, am Christian. And there's, yes, in short.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it certainly inspires us to look deeper. Once we adopt Bitcoin, gives us more time to look inwards. And like you mentioned, I just feel caring for the rest of the world too is a spiritual aspect because I'd no longer just care about myself. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. But I will say for people that might have a different view, Bitcoin is for anyone, really. And I think sometimes, at least often, resistance I hear is, oh, there's kind of a group thing to Bitcoin, or maybe a dogma, or everyone all eats meat and believes it this way. And I was actually vegan for 7 years. I think to not scare anyone away, there are so many different people of all different perspectives and attitudes in this space. And so, it's not like a homogenous group of people that all think one way, but I think a lot of the values that Bitcoin stands for are, within most humans naturally. And then we all have different things that we prioritize or disagree on or diverge on in ways. Um, and I think disagreement is also helpful and can kind of highlight blind spots and help you kind of speak. And, disagreement can kind of help you go further than just, oh, we all agree on this one thing. Because then what might be missing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Bitcoin is for everybody. It's some money, it's a tool. It might inspire people to go deeper, but it's for everybody. And that's what we love about Bitcoin. How has it most changed you?
Um, I think I am. So I wrote one of my college essays about peanut butter, and how I feel. Everywhere I go, I bring back peanut butter, from that trip, and basically I wrote the essay about how, all of these different communities and travel that I've been in, described it in terms of the peanut butter from that country. But living. So my first year of college, lived by myself in a really kind of remote area because I could not get to actually Shanghai. It was still in the COVID, Delta, Omicron period of things. And I really did not feel like myself. And then actually 1031. I've never been a huge Halloween fan until I found Bitcoin. I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of rebrand this date. But I was like, okay, I'm going to get a big bag of candy and a bowl so that when trick or treaters come, I can give them candy. And that was the first day where I felt much more like myself. And I realized that for weeks, I had just been thinking about myself every single day. I didn't have a roommate anymore who I could make lunch for. I went to a boarding school for high school. I didn't really have close neighbors that I could take their trash can, or they weren't there. I couldn't take their trash cans out or in for them. And I realized community is really my bedrock. And so I think if I've changed at all, it's been just all of the, knowledge and gifts and kind of shaping that all the communities I've gotten to meet through Bitcoin have influenced my life, and all the people that have really touched me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Ella. Your story is amazing. You're so young and fresh and new in this space. I see you going so far.
Thank
And
you, Paula.
I will post links to your X and your website. Is there anywhere else people can find you?
No, those are the best places, and thank you so much for having me and for all that you do.
Thank you.